Okay, what's going on everyone? My name is Kyle, and in today's episode we're going to be covering an introduction to HTML and XHTML. And the things that we're going to be covering in this episode obviously are the basics, like what is HTML, what kind of text editor can you use? Can you use something like Dreamweaver? How to make a basic page, HTML versus XHTML, and some of the sort of more in-depth parts of it. So let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is what is HTML? So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and basically it allows you to create web pages on the internet that people can view, read, and stuff like that. So everything that you use on the internet, YouTube, Facebook, everything like that is more or less for the most part coded in HTML, and obviously with other stuff in the background to make it sort of a bit prettier and more functional. So basically I'm going to show you how to get started into HTML and what kind of stuff you're going to need. So we'll jump right into that now. Okay, so depending on which operating system you run will depend on what you can use for your text editor, I guess. As you can see here, I run a version of Linux, and on Linux I use the command line text editor called Vim. Linux users will know that there are plenty more than just Vim. There's Emacs, there's GEdit, there's GVim, there's all sorts of other different text editors. So it is really up to preference, but I actually prefer using a text editor to what you would call an IDE, or a what you see is what you get type interface, which is, for example, something like Dreamweaver in Windows as a part of the Adobe suite will let you create web pages and stuff like that. But I find that if you use something like Dreamweaver, you're not actually, it's not really cheating, but it doesn't really give you an in-depth sort of understanding of what HTML is, and how to sort of use it in an effective manner. And if something on your page breaks, you don't really know how to fix it, because when you're just dragging and dropping things onto the screen, you're not really grasping the idea. Once you understand, you can go back to something like that, and I did for quite some time. But it's just sort of, when you're starting out, you kind of need to understand how it's all working, so that when something breaks, you know how to fix it, or when you need to look at something else as an example or something like that, you know exactly how it works. Also, things like Dreamweaver I find to be a little bit harder to make cross-platform friendly websites. Basically the main goal of making a website is to make sure that it's going to work on as many different platforms as possible, so mobile devices, different size screens, so make sure you test your website and stuff like that. Okay, so how do you make a basic HTML page? Now I've prepared something already. Okay, so this is a basic HTML page here, and we'll cover what this is over here a little bit later on. Okay, so the first thing that you need is the document type. So this basically tells the browser that's requesting the page what to expect, or what the expected page is. So in this case, it's a HTML page. Okay, so this is commenting, so you can add text into your website that won't actually get put out onto the page, and it actually helps you read through the page and try and work out what's what. So we can open up that page, which is this one here, and we'll just drop it down in size. If I can grab it. Can I grab it? There we go. And we'll move it over here. So this code here is basically what it is output onto the page. So I'm going to go through basically just step by step what each of these funny text things is, for those of you who don't really know. It's not going to be super in-depth, so if you want to learn a bit more, then Google is your friend. So HTML is basically the opening tag, or we use what's called tags in HTML, which is basically how do I explain it in simple terms? It's kind of like just the opening and closing of sections on a website. That's what it is in a nutshell. So all pages pretty much need to start with HTML, a heading or a header, a title, a body, and and that's pretty much it. So this is your basic page. Now you can see here that I've actually purposely made mistakes on this page, which we'll cover why I've done that later on. But this is the basic layout of a HTML document. Okay, so now we're going to cover HTML versus XHTML. Okay, so XHTML is extensive hypertext markup language, which basically uses it's more strict basically. So you can see how I've made all of these mistakes on the page. XHTML has sort of come in and is a way to make sure that pages that get published on the internet are of a correct standard, basically, because more or less what will happen is you can just type out any old garble onto the screen here if you don't really know what you're doing, and you can actually, because the browser is smart enough to actually guess kind of what you want it to do, you might not be able to pick up that you've actually made an error on the page, because the browser is going, well, you wrote this, so I'm kind of going to take a guess, take a stab, and I think this is what you wanted, and it'll output it onto the page, which means that across browsers, your results may vary, basically. So something like IE, heaven forbid if you use that, it might look different. Same with Opera, same with Chrome, all the pages could look different. Which is why XHTML is sort of like a standard, basically, that makes sure that when your page gets written, it gets written correctly, and there's a whole bunch of rules and standards that need to be followed. So where you've got doc type equals HTML, this is actually giving doc type equals HTML. All the rest you kind of really don't need to worry about, but this part here, strict, means that it is applying strict rules to your XHTML document. Now it still looks the same, you still get, you still save it the same way and stuff like that, but yeah, it's essentially different. Okay, so you've got your HTML tag here. Now this is the, this right here basically is letting the document, is letting the browser know exactly what type of HTML it is. It's kind of, it's a little bit hard to explain, but it's sort of basically like the XHTML tag type thing, if that makes sense. So the next thing you move on to, so head is the same, meta, which is basically information about the page, and you can add all sorts of stuff like the author of the page, the content that's actually on the page, you know, you like your keywords and stuff like that, and actually what is to be expected into the page and what character set is to be used as well. Then you've got the title, okay, and this is the page output, and I'll bring it up right now. And as you can see, there you go. Right, so what's the difference? Basically, these pages look almost the same. They look pretty much identical, but I'll point out some of the things that are actually wrong with the HTML document as compared to the XHTML document, and then we'll take a look at the errors in a little bit. Okay, so everything pretty much starts okay up until you get past the body. So the body is where all of the main content of the website is stored. Now you can see here I've got a H1, which is heading 1, which is basically giving you this. This is your big heading. Heading 1 goes all the way down. I can't remember how many it goes down, but it goes like 1 through 6 or something like that, and they gradually get smaller. So this is a big title. I've put it in bold. You probably can't tell. I don't know if it actually renders on the page or not. And then you can see that I've closed the heading 1 tag before I've closed the bold. Now it, in this case, doesn't affect anything, but what you need to make sure you do when you're writing HTML is that your nested tags are correct. So if you've got, we'll just jump into here. Okay, so if you've got a, I don't know, what could I have? Yeah, we'll do a different heading. So we'll do a H3, and then we want to make it italics. Okay, so then when you type in, this is my second heading, you need to make sure that you close the italics before you close the heading 3. Okay, so that, so that these are called nested elements. So basically you need to make sure that everything is in order. If H1 starts first, then it has to be the last to close. If bold starts second, then it has to be second last to close, and that's basically the gist of it. The next one is images. Now you can see here that everything is in uppercase. This isn't correct. It was the way that I was taught way back in high school. It was all typed out in uppercase. Now it'll still work, obviously, but it's not the standard, and it's bad practice basically. And these are all the things that we're going to cover are bad practice and really shouldn't be done at all. So you can see here image source, and then you can see we've just put the closing tag on there, and that's still not actually correct either, which we'll go through in a little bit. So you need to make sure that everything is lowercase, even your if you were to specify widths and heights, so elements and attributes must be in lowercase. Next one is not closing elements. So when you're starting a paragraph, you can't just put in the P and then type out your paragraph and then do another P and then type out your next paragraph. You need to actually have an open and a close of your paragraph. So if this was your paragraph here, you'd have to add in a closing P there and a closing P there, and that would be correct. Yes. Okay. The next one is how you're supposed to close empty elements. So empty elements are your ones like your image, your line break, and there are quite a few others. I just can't put my finger on the rest of them. But how you close one, instead of just open and then close, you need to open and then close with your slash. So just like how when you actually close one up here, you're just closing it to show that it's an empty element, which means that nothing goes in between it, if that makes sense. So where you P, you've got a P open and a P close, something is actually going in between, whereas your empty elements, there is nothing actually in between a line break. It's just a line break. And the other one would be a horizontal rule. So if you were to do a horizontal rule like that, because it's a horizontal rule, nothing goes in between a horizontal rule, it's just what it is. And same with images. So in this case, we would put one there, and that would be correct. Okay, so and basically as a comparison, if you're watching this video, you can see over here how it's actually laid out correctly. The other thing you need to make sure of is that you can't just have random stuff that's sort of sitting outside of the document, if that kind of makes sense. So something like an image, if it's sitting outside of a paragraph, then it's not right. It'll still work on the page and everything, but it's not actually, it's not considered correct. So you need to have it in something, whether it's a paragraph or something else, or a header or something like that. And same with line breaks as well. And the other thing to keep a note of as well is when you're specifying or when you're inserting images onto a page, you also need to make sure that you specify the width and the height, as well as your alt text and your title. Now this is just a general practice, good and bad practice type thing. So if you were to put this image out on the page like that, that would work. It would work fine, no dramas. But if you had a browser if you had someone with a slow internet connection, you've got a lot of text on your page, what actually specifying the width and the height does actually allows a space on that page of that size for the image. So then when all your text comes in, your text is always going to load first because it's just the fastest thing to load. When you're downloading the image, if your text loads first and then your images all over the page start to load, it sort of shifts the text around as the page loads. So if someone's trying to read the page while their images are loading on their slow internet connection, it's going to shift all the text around. They're going to lose their spot, and it's a bit of a pain in the ass. And your alt text is really good for your what do they call them? Is it verbal browsers, text to speech, that type of thing for with people with disabilities and stuff like that. And also shows if the image doesn't render properly. And I think actually the title is also for that, or just when someone mouses over, if they go, what's that a picture of, they can mouse over it and it'll actually tell them what it is. What else is there? And that's basically it. So like you can see here, there's not much of a difference between these pages at all. But when you run it through something like a validator, this is the validation of the page, this one here. So it gives you some of the errors that are wrong with it. So what do we got here? End tag h1 seen, but there were open elements. So this would be the fact that your nested elements weren't closed in the correct order. So your B your bold should actually be closed before your header one closes. And unclosed element. So because you've closed your heading one and you've opened your bold tag there, it hasn't actually seen that you've closed it because it's not sitting in the right spot. Is that actually? Ooh. I want to actually see if that's modified. No, it hasn't. Probably because it knows. But the image element must have an alt attribute except for under certain conditions. Blah blah blah. So you need to have an alt. Consult guidance on providing text alternatives for images. Okay. Bad value attribute source on image must not be empty. So that's just a generic error because I didn't put in an image. Again, image must have an alt attribute. But if you run it through, I ran this one through the same validator, and this one has been validated successfully. It was HTML 1.0 strict. So yeah, no errors, which is cool. So that's pretty much it. So what I will actually do is run through the some of the text editors, and we'll go through that. So Vim is the one that I'm using here. Now Vim's really good if you're, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember if Vim actually works on Windows or not. You'll have to check that. But Vim's really, really good because it comes with you can get a lot of plugins for it. It's really easy to use. The beauty that I find is that the plugins allow it to become a really powerful text editor, not just for programming and stuff like that, but for a lot of stuff. It's got really good syntax highlighting. You can apply color schemes and stuff like that to it to make it look pretty. And it is really good at picking up what language you're in. So it automatically picked up that I was in HTML and formatted the page accordingly, which is really, really neat. And you can have all sorts of plugins like auto tag completion and syntax checking and stuff like that. That's really, really handy. The other one, if you're sort of not super competent with Linux, or you just like a graphical user interface based editor, would be something like GEdit, which is basically all your everything's really it's going to be very familiar to you. So you've got Control C, Control V for your copy and your paste and stuff like that, which isn't the case in something like this. If I want to copy and paste, you've got to YY. Is it YY? Yeah, it is. Except I don't think I did it right. Yeah, but that is how you do it. So you pull a line and then you paste it. I wonder if I actually, yeah. So there you go. And then that's the paste. And same with deleting or cutting and pasting. Same deal. Saving is a little bit different. Basically, the idea behind Vim is that it's all keyboard based, whereas something like GEdit is all can be shortcut based, but there's a lot of mouse stuff in there as well. And if you're looking for something in between, then I would suggest something like GVim or Emacs has a graphical user interface / command line interface setup as well. And Vim and Emacs are pretty much same thing. It's both command line based, but some people just prefer one over the other. It's kind of like Windows versus Linux, I guess, which is, yeah. And if you are running Windows, then a good one to go for is Notepad++. Basically, that's where it's at the moment. I don't really know of any other one that sort of comes close. That's pretty funny. That was just as I was doing some testing. Notepad++ is good because you can actually pick your language and stuff in here. So we've got XML, HTML. Does it have anything under? No, it doesn't. and it should do all the highlighting for you as well, which is really handy. And that's a good Windows alternative if you run Windows. And basically all the instructions and stuff that I have given you as well are will work on both Windows and Linux. So it's just a preference thing. So basically all the stuff that I show you can use on anyone. So that pretty much wraps it up. And in the next episode we will continue on and actually start making a proper page. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.